Welcome to the Dreams That Built Us, where we lift up the legacies that shaped our past and guide our future.
We're your hosts, Kara and Teresa. In every episode, we explore the power of legacy, cultural memory, and living the dreams of those who came before us.
Today, we're holding space to honor the dreams of two groups whose sacrifices are stitched into the foundation of this country and enslaved people. Their labor, resilience, and resistance made it possible for us to exist, speak freely, and dream without permission.
Yes, whether they arrived by force or by hope, both groups were driven by something bigger than themselves: survival, safety, a future they may never see but deeply believed in. That's sacred.
And it's important to name that our freedom to create, protest, rest, and thrive that didn't come out of nowhere. It was paid for by those who picked cotton and cane, by those who crossed oceans for the possibility of dignity.
We're not here because we earned it alone. We're here because they didn't give up. Can we say the same? Are we encouraging future generations to earn what they get? How easily do we give up because the fight is too hard? Let's talk about those dreams, what those dreams actually look like for enslaved people. The dream wasn't always freedom in the grand political sense. It was the right to keep your children, even your family together, to say your real name, to not be broken or abused.
Exactly. And for immigrants, especially those fleeing colonization or economic hardship, the dream might have been as simple as safety, education, or sending money home. These weren't abstract ideals, they were a daily hope.
And often they knew they wouldn't live to see the full picture, but they planted seeds. They made sure that someone, somewhere, someday could live out loud in a way they never could. They consistently planted seeds of hope and faith.
And that's why legacy is not just a memory, it's momentum. Their dreams push us forward. Teresa, can you say more about momentum?
When I think of momentum, I think of resilience. I think of pushing through, even though you may not see the results that you want to see, but you keep going because you have hope and faith that your work will not be in vain and that future generations will benefit from it. It kind of, for me, is synonymous with legacy. Only I think now when we talk legacy, we think something financial. But for our ancestors, I feel like the momentum slash legacy was seed planting and hope building. So go ahead. Were you going to say something, Kyra?
I was going to say, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I think, no one could predict how things would turn out when you're separated from family. Whether you're a slave or immigrant, you're crossing these dangerous lands and seas and bodies of water, and you don't know if you're going to survive. You don't know if the person who you came with is going to be next to you. And they're speaking a different language or they're not from the same area. So when you plant those seeds, you're not just planting them for an individual, it's like you're planning it for the culture. You're planning it for the future so that everyone can benefit from it.
But I'm also wondering, like, they say hindsight is 2020. So where we sit, we can look back and say that the seeds and the momentum was for a culture. But like I just think about the ancestors of Black people. So when you were on the boat during the transatlantic journey, I feel like you're thinking about more on a micro level. like me and mine. But as beneficiaries of that thought process, it puts it more on a macro level. And now, when we plant seeds and think of our momentum and our legacies, it's on, like you said before, it's more on a grandiose level. It's like I'm doing it for the culture. I'm doing it for the people. But just the responsibility of thinking about your children or your spouse, companion that you were pulled away from on this journey, what a burden. How heavy was that weight in comparison to now it being on a macro level, but you have more people in the fight, I'll call it.
Yeah. And I wonder if, this generation, the generations past, if they appreciate what we had to do to get here because, just speaking specifically of African Americans, we were not immigrants. We were actually stolen from our own lands and brought to this foreign land. So I wonder if, it is so long ago, if this generation can appreciate what was done to get to where we are and what a journey it must have been to have to go through all that. It's the abuse, the rapes, the separation of family, the denial of rights. It was so much just to get where we are today.
And like you said, when we got here, our language, what happened to our language? In order to survive, you had to learn another language. And then when you learn the language, I feel like originally your native tongue was not allowed. And for some immigrants, I remember a time when there were some people who spoke Spanish that were not allowed to speak Spanish on their jobs. Like they really had to fight for the right to speak their language to each other on their job. And I don't know, sometimes I worry that our, the, the younger generations, the now generation just kind of thinks that what immigrants went through is like a story or something they watch on Netflix. They don't see the connection between that work and where they are today and the work that needs to continue.
Yeah, I think, and this is just again speaking from the African American viewpoint, I don't think they do understand that journey because we've been here in this country for so long. But I think immigrants can understand that journey and that assimilation and that whole process because they are literally they continue to come into the country. They continue to have to take boats and rafts and, come through deserts and everything. So they understand the danger and they know that this is not just something in the past. This is something that currently is happening. This is what our people are currently going through so that we can be safe and so that we can have a future for our families.
When you were saying that, I thought about the quote unquote American dream. Did our ancestors that were kidnapped, was it their dream for us to embrace the American dream, or was it their dream for us to just be able to survive in this new land. Because really, what is the American dream and who is the American dream for? As a descendant of the Creek Indian who's been here, like these are natives to what is now called America. What does the American dream look like for the Native American? I mean the true Native American. So when we talk about our ancestors' dreams, what is that dream? Because I can remember like talking to my grandmother, who was my great grandmother was Creek Indian. I recently found out that my great great grandfather was a white man. So my grandmother never talked about the house with the white picket fence and I guess it's two and a half, four and a however many children, 6-figure job. My grandmother only talked about making it through each day. And I think now when immigrants come to this America, it's for safety. So does safety include a house with a white picket fence and a 6-figure salary and children in private schools and private colleges? That dream is just so, sometimes I think the dream is undefinable because it's so created. It's a result of the individual. But
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone because, like you said, some people just want to survive. It's like it's like weighing two devils. It's like this or that. If you stay in your country, some countries, are ruled by dictators and it's oppressive. They can't vote. They live on 5,000 a year, whereas here, you know, 35,000 is way more than that. Like, you can get work. Our poor in America are richer than the poor in other countries. We have shelters, we have transitional housing, we have public assistance. They don't even have that in other countries. So it's kind of weighing what's best, like live here and, you know, get that dream of having something of your own, being able to have that freedom, to be who you want to be, or do you stay in your country and perhaps just perish, and keep struggling? I think there's struggle everywhere, but I think it's defining what is worse. Do you want to starve every day, or do you want to come here and, you know, benefit from what we do have? It's one of the greatest countries in the world, but we do still have our issues, our dirty laundry. It's
hmm,
no different than any other. It's just maybe a step better.
yeah, that is definitely the question. And the assimilation piece, is the assimilation always good, and how deep do you assimilate?
That's a good question. I do admire when I do see a lot of immigrants who do come here, especially like first generation immigrants. They are able to retain their history, their language, their traditions, their culture, those things that we as African Americans were not able to retain, unfortunately. So it's always interesting to see that they're one foot in their own culture and just enough room to maneuver within the American culture just so they can get by and just so they can still benefit.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So What does it mean to live the legacy of people who built this country but were denied citizenship, freedom, even personhood?
I think it means we don't take anything for granted. We speak up, we show up, we make choices with purpose. We vote, we build, we rest when they couldn't, we create opportunities that they were locked out of. And, when I think of it, when I was growing up, I was always taught that, the whole American dream or the whole purpose is you do one better than what your parents did. You just keep trucking along and you do what makes you happy. You earn your living. You have a purpose. So I think when I'm thinking about it, I don't, the goal for me was to get a seat at the table, so to speak, make myself heard, do things so that, you know, my culture, people who look like me would benefit so we could be included in the politics, the decision making. But now I think I don't want a seat at the table. I want to make the table
Yeah.
and make seats available.
So that now changes the appearance of the ancestors' dream because we are going to be considered ancestors. So you've raised the bar. Like you said, it's no longer just um, having a seat at the table, but it's building the table, and in some cases taking away seats from some people who have mismanaged the seats that they had.
Mm,
Yeah, because
makes
they're
sense.
not they're using the seat for personal gain, and that's not what the seat is for. Yeah. So if you can't manage it, then you shouldn't have it. And in addition to that, I feel like it also means that we stay connected to culture. We stay connected to the language, the music, the food, the faith. These are acts of resilience. And today, preserving them is an act of reclamation. We must be willing to make a concrete investment in legacy and history. We can't just talk about it, but we really, really have to be about it, especially today, right now, when we're in a time when only the legacy of European Americans is given any notice, any respect, any importance. So we just can't sit back and say, oh, it's too bad that's happening. Other cultures have to be actively involved in preserving their history. Because if you don't have a history, you really don't have anything to build a legacy on.
That, that's a good one. Let's be clear, this isn't about romanticizing a struggle. It's about respecting sacrifice and responding with action. Their pain wasn't their purpose, their resilience was.
Yeah, they didn't just survive, they dreamed, and we owe it to them to live fully, boldly, and together. We owe them us living like we belong, like we're residents here and not just visitors.
Yeah, I think wherever you are listening from, take a moment and ask yourself, what have I inherited from the dreams of my people? Am I living in a way that honors those who couldn't? How can I turn gratitude into action? I think for me, I think just getting my education, retaining my freedom, being able to speak out, being able to hand down knowledge. I think that is my way of honoring my ancestors, learning about my history, knowing what it took to get here in America to this point. I think that is my way of honoring them and inheriting. Being safe, doing it for the people, not just selfish gains, but working to better my community and to make it so that we do continue to have a voice and that people do understand that, yes, America was built on the backs of slaves and immigrants, and this is where we are now.
And not only was America built on the backs of slaves and immigrants, but if we look closely at where we are right now, it's the work of immigrants that can possibly cause things to come to a standstill in this country, because there are some jobs that some people aren't going to do. Now we live in a place where minimum wage isn't acceptable, because the reality is it tends to be the less you make, the harder you work. And hard work isn't really what we like to do anymore. So we find ourselves in a situation where only people who can't get particular types of jobs will do the jobs that really keep this country moving. For me, I don't know. I can honestly and in full transparency say that I don't know if I'm living in a way that honors my ancestors. Most of the time, I continue to think on a micro level. It's my legacy that I'm building is for me and mine. I know I do not spend enough time teaching my grandchildren their history in its totality. The education system that me and mine have been exposed to is like Black people were dropped in America, and that was when our existence began, or that's when our existence became important. But who we were in the beginning is not taught in schools, and I know that I don't spend enough time reminding my queendom why they're considered part of a queendom, because we just didn't Black people didn't wake up one day and they were slaves. We existed in greatness before that, and it's the same way with our Native American, and I'll use that term loosely. That is the same with that side of who we are. Like I said, I just recently found out that my great great grandfather was a white man. So, what does that mean to who we are? And how do we incorporate that into that framework that defines us? So now, at this point, it's my responsibility to continue teaching, to continue preserving the music. Um, I think back now to the movie Sinners, and the dance scene and everybody that was involved in the dance scene. But the reality is everybody is really a part of this dance called humanity. So racism, if I don't like European Americans, I don't like a part of me because I have a great great grandfather who was a European American. If I don't like the Native American that doesn't recognize the fact that the Native American and the African American are closely intertwined. That's a part of me that I'm not willing to accept. So this thing is just is it's a lot, but I how do I turn my gratitude into action? I turn my gratitude into action by equipping my grandchildren with as much information as I can about their history and not just the history that textbooks are willing to give them. Have to give it all to them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And with this critical race theory, we don't want to give them the ugly. The schools, the education system doesn't want to give them the ugly, so that becomes my responsibility and the responsibility of their parents. So maybe it's learning more about my lineage. Maybe it's showing up for immigrants' rights and prison abolition. Maybe it's teaching my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchild their full history. Maybe it's me healing so my family doesn't experience and repeat the same pain. Maybe it's like you said, living out loud, not shrinking myself so others are comfortable. I today am unapologetically me because that's what my ancestors lived and died so I could be. So while there's that piece of the ancestral dream that wants better for those that come after, better is being able to be unapologetically who you are as a native of wherever you're from.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think going back to some of the stuff you said, um, in particularly like being hearing those uncomfortable truths, I think that's really important. Um, because every culture, whether it be religion, race, gender, whatever, everyone has their own little dirty secret or their own little thing that's not pleasant to hear or to learn about. And whether we acknowledge it or not, a lot of immigrants or even slaves, it began within their own culture. And then it became, an economic thing where they were sold off to other people. So, not saying that, we are the cause of this or anything, but I think we have to be honest about where we came from. And then we have to look at some of the history in America and realize that some of our history is parallel. It's interwoven, it's very complicated, it's very complex. Like Native Americans and Africans, they mix, and some of the tribes are mixed with African and Native American. You think of the Jewish history and African Americans and the civil rights, those are very strongly connected, especially if we think about the rights that we have today. So I think living in legacy doesn't always look big and loud. Sometimes it's boundaries, sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's simply knowing your worth, sometimes it's simply knowing your history and acknowledging where you can do better and how you can do better for the collective.
Yes. And I think we need to keep in mind that it's for the collective. It's not necessarily just for you and yours, but it's definitely each one reach one and teach one. So, on that note, good people, we thank you for joining us on the dreams that built us. If you felt seen, moved, or inspired, Plant a seed by sharing this episode, starting a conversation, and making your presence matter in the future. Start a conversation, make it matter.
And remember, every step you take with intention, every truth you speak, every space you reclaim is a prayer answered for someone who couldn't even whisper.
Start a conversation, make it matter.
Till next time, keep dreaming forward.
Keep dreaming forward.